Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. Just seeing the counting of attendees. Buenos días, Silvia. Great. Well, thanks for joining us today. First of all, I'm going to say we're sorry that this webinar is going to be in English, and we'll explain that in the near future, a lot of the things will actually happen in Spanish related to the JEDI, to the initiative. But we're going to give the information in English, given that there's a lot of interest from people globally that don't necessarily speak Spanish. But first of all, please feel free to write to us in Spanish if you have any type of doubt. This webinar and the material and the PowerPoint presentation will be available after the call. So if you have any doubt afterwards, you can also always contact us for that. But thank you for joining us today to talk a little bit more about the Guatemala Entrepreneurship Development Initiative Fund. If you don't know me, probably, I'm Monica Dupa. I'm the head for Central America and Mexico. I'm based in Mexico City. And I have the great pleasure to introduce you to our newest team member, who's also the program manager for JEDI, which is Hugo Aguilar, and he'll be explaining everything today, and we'll be answering all the questions you have. So also, please feel free to write every question you have in the Q&A box. We appreciate that you do that there, because that's a way where we can compile all your questions. And if we don't answer anything today, we can follow up with you afterwards as well. So thank you for being here, and Hugo, please go ahead.
Thank you, Monica. Hi, everyone. So I'll start. This webinar will take about an hour or so. So let's start. So first of all, this meeting will be recorded, as Monica said. It will be posted on the webpage, so you can consult it afterwards. And be sure to put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen, please. Not in the chat box. So that's why we put this, because some people put it in the chat box and we don't read it immediately, but put it in the Q&A section, and we will try to read it, all of them. So English will be the main language, but if you prefer to ask questions in Spanish, it's okay. So this is the agenda for today. We will take a couple of minutes explaining the guide, and then we will take around 10 minutes talking about the JEDI Fund, the applicant resources, and the communications. And we have 4 spotlights regarding the call for concept notes, eligible organizations, the submission formats, the selection process, and a couple of reasons you may be unsuccessful. And then we will have an open session for Q&A, the ones that we have in the chat box, not in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. And of course, as Monica mentioned, any question that we may not answer here, we can do a follow-up on by email. Most of you have already my email, but at the end I will put it also in the chat box. So the main objective of this webinar is to provide any clarification and guidance needed and facilitate the application process, especially for local organizations with limited capacity than the ones that are international organizations that can apply to the JEDI Fund. So let's start. This first slide is for you to understand a little bit about JEDI, the whole initiative. So a quick overview is that, Usaid and ANDI will foster a stronger entrepreneurial ecosystem to bring economic, especially to those communities impacted by irregular immigration. So that's the big scope of this initiative, but specifically, JEDI will develop a coordinated set of expanded business support services available to entrepreneurs. And we have a special focus on those entrepreneurs or businesses run by employing or serving women, indigenous and rural communities, especially youth. So that is something you need to keep in mind when doing the concept notes, that this is the end beneficiary. However, the initiative seeks to bring expanded business support services to those entrepreneurs, to those businesses. So that's for you to have in mind. And what we expect as an outcome from the proposal is this expanded support services to access new and or better markets, to access to capital, and to access to business support services for investment readiness. So that's a big overview of what JEDI is for you to have in mind when writing and submitting your concept notes. Now, specifically about the JEDI fund, the first glance I want to give you is how ANDE does this funding. So a brief history: since 2009, ANDE has been doing Catalyst and Challenge funds. And that's why USAID is trusting us with this. The ANDE's main target is the SGD sector. As you may know, there's a definition specifically that ANDE uses for SGD. The goals are, well, they try to contribute to the SDGs, specifically number 5, which is gender equality, number 8, decent work and economic growth, and 13, climate and environmental action. So since ANDE is the implementing partner, for saying it, so we also seek for the sub-grantees or the sub-grants to impact and contribute on these 3 SDGs. So as I mentioned, we seek to foster a stronger entrepreneurial ecosystem, especially to those areas heavily affected by immigration. So on the fund, we have 2 sources. See, your funding support is from USAID, but also from private sector partners. So that's why this is called an initiative and not a project or a program per se, because what we seek is that the USAID funds serve as a catalyst for private sector funding. So all of the concept notes will be evaluated by ANDE, of course, but also by USAID and by private sector partners that are willing to support with funds to these concept notes and, of course, eventually the proposals. Target regions, you know, it's the whole Republic of Guatemala. We don't have well, we have the regions that are mentioned on the call for concept notes. However, what we need to target is those communities affected by immigration. The organization types, it's open for nonprofit and for-profit organizations, especially to those that give support to entrepreneurs. So we can mention incubators, accelerators, and others related. Funding type mainly will be grants, but if a private sector partner also is interested on giving refundable grants, they can do it, and that also will be part of the JEDI initiative. And the project size we seek on this call for concept notes are between 250,000 US and 2 million. Just a reminder on the timeline, the issuance of the concept notes, the call for concept note was on November 17th. The deadline is on December the 15th, and shortlisted applicants will be invited to submit a full proposal on January 14th. You will have a couple of weeks to submit this full proposal until February the 4th, and the final awards will be announced in March of next year. We ask for projects with a duration of 2 years from April 2022 till April 2024. The applicant resources, you can find them on the webpage you already know. You can find the call for concept notes in English, a free translation for the call for concept notes in Spanish. You can find the online application form link and the templates, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation or a Word presentation, both of them, a Word document. However, both of them need to be submitted in PDF format. And you can also find a frequently asked questions document that will be updated this Friday, adding up the questions you will ask in this webinar. You can also find information in our communication channels. You can register for our newsletters. We have global and regional ones. You can also find us on social media. Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter are our only channels for now. But also we have regional channels for LinkedIn, Latin America. We have Twitter for Latin America. And of course, you can follow the JEDI website page for any updates. So just talking about the eligible organizations and clarify a little bit. The ones that are eligible to apply are nonprofit and for-profit ESOs, such as, but not limited to, incubators, accelerators, investors, capacity development providers, NGOs, operating non-grant making foundations, and research and advisory service providers. If you have any questions or doubts, if your organizations belong to this group, you can send me an email and we'll try to give you clearance on if you are or not eligible to apply. Ineligible organizations are government agencies, donor finance institutions, and grant-making foundations. So again, please feel free to send me an email because this will be addressed case by case. But of course, any question will be answered regarding this specific topic. Regarding the notes, the concept note submission formats, as I mentioned, a text-based document with a maximum limit of 3 pages in PDF format, and a slide document, a PowerPoint document, maximum limit of 10 slides, but also submitted in PDF. Regarding the selection process, we have a pre-screening step 1, where Andy will review like a first screening for these concept notes that to ensure that these submissions meet the basic qualifying criteria. Then in step 2, we use a scoring matrix, and a review committee identifies the top applicants, which are going to be invited to submit a full proposal. So in this review committee, I want to mention that it's an ANDI committee, but we will also have USAID and private sector partners that have already committed to join JEDI as funders. So in this step, this joint committee will decide which of the concept notes are going to be required to submit full proposals. And as I mentioned before, the funding may come from Usaid funds, but also may come from private sector partners. And step 3, an external selection committee, which includes third-party experts, partner funders will review the proposals to make final decisions. The winners will be announced in March 2022, as I mentioned before. And finishing up with the information I have for you this morning, the reasons you may be unsuccessful. Well, and the funding opportunities tend to attract a large volume of applications. So even though we may have very, very good proposals, you may not be selected, not because your proposal is not good, but we also tend to have a large volume of proposals. But in this case, you may also receive funding from our private sector partners. So there's a big chance that we can fund a large number of proposals. And doing a clarification here, we don't have a fixed number of proposals we will fund, because as I mentioned, with the adding up of the private sector partners, we don't have an idea on how many of those proposals will be funded with private funds. So that number is still not, and it will not be defined initially, but will be defined in the process, depending on the interest of the private sector partners that are willing and interested to fund some of these proposals. And the main other reason is not following the submission guidelines, including simple things like not adhering the maximum number of pages or the grant limited requested, and of course, the timeline. So I have received other specific questions regarding the application. Specifically, for example, if you have a legal registration in Guatemala as a Sociedad Anónima or as an NGO, if you could apply, and the answer is yes, because it's open for-profit and non-profit organizations. Other question I have received frequently is if you can apply to one or more, you can do one or more application, and that is also answered in the Q&A document, and it's a yes. You can apply with 2 or more applications on the concept note stage. And one of the other questions I receive a lot is if you can use the money that you are going to receive as a subgrantee for loans or equity or any other instrument to entrepreneurs, and that is a no. The main purpose of the grants will be to strengthen the support services you give to entrepreneurs. So at the end, it will be a grant that strengthens your organization. And of course, it's open for counterpart or leverage fund that you can give as loan to entrepreneurs. But the main purpose is to strengthen the services you give to entrepreneurs. And so those were the 3 questions I received a lot before this webinar. And now I will try to answer the Q&As on the Q&A chat box. I will also be honest with you, and if I don't know the answer right now for your questions, I will do a follow-up and try to answer them as soon as possible with my colleagues from Andy. So now I will take a minute or so to read the Q&As on the box, and I try to answer them in chronological order. So the first one I have is from Alejandro Gonzalez. It says, can for-profit companies apply directly? For example, a company that focuses on rural electrification. Thanks. So yes, that's a yes. As I mentioned, if you are registered in Guatemala as a Sociedad Anónima, you can apply. There's no limitation to that. You have to be very clear on what will be the impact of the funds you receive that are aligned to the JEDI objectives. As long as you justify rural electrification as an improvement to the services you give to entrepreneurs, then that will be very attractive for Andy, Usaid, and any private sector partner. So I hope I answer your question. Esther Santizo asked if the application is in English or Spanish. It's in English, and I'll tell you why specifically. Since most of the private sector partners are based in the US, they are not Spanish speakers. And since we are going to share this call for concept notes, and if you are selected, the full proposals, those need to be in English. Next one from Michelle Johnson. Can you share the scoring matrix with weighting? No, I cannot do that. It's an internal process from Andy. However, you can find the guidelines we will use to evaluate, and that you can find them in the call for concept notes. Next one from Joanna Reckens. Approximately how many proposals can be funded? We don't have a number yet for the reason I explained before. Since the private sector partners are joining and will keep joining, that's an important thing I didn't mention, that we keep seeking for private sector funders. So that number is not fixed. Therefore, the number of proposals we are going to fund is not fixed. So that's the reason why I don't have a number on how many proposals we will fund. And I don't believe we will have a number in the duration of JEDI, because as new private sector partners will be joining, we can be funding more and more proposals. Next one from Luis Castañeda. Can an organization present more than one program? Yes, you can apply to as many, well, you can send as many concept notes as you want. That's not a limitation. Mark Schleifer.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Sorry. Just to add about if an organization can present more than one, definitely that's the answer. Although we wouldn't fund more than one proposal from the same organization. So you can definitely submit more, but we wouldn't select more than one from the same organization.
Thank you, Monica. So Mark, good morning. Can you give us a sense of how many awards are planned for the total funding pool? I have already answered that. I cannot give you a fixed number, and I don't think JEDI will have a fixed number ever, because we're asking for more and more partners, private sector partners to join. Elizabeth Gosser says, quick query, will the grants contract funded by the private sector partners co-funding this effort with USAID allowed to include indirect costs in the budget? Yes, it is mentioned in the Q&As. You can include indirect costs, including overhead. Afia Amanfo says, hello, can an organization, Exempli Gracia, US-based organization, submit two concept notes, one as lead and the other as an implementing partner? That's a good question. And it's a yes. So you can send a concept note as a lead and one as an implementing partner. As long as it's clear in each of the concept notes, it's okay for us. But keep in mind what Monica just mentioned, that we can only fund one organization. Well, we can give only one grant to each organization, even if it's a lead or an implementing partner. So Elizabeth asks if can the effort include any grant mechanism towards the small businesses, say equity investment or similar? So you can put that you will do equity investment, but that specific part will be funded by as a counterpart, as a leverage fund from your side. You cannot do it with Usaid money. And maybe, and that's a big maybe, the private sector will allow that, but at least with Usaid money, with Usaid granting, it's a no. So, which is the total volume of the current fund available? We don't have a fixed number because we are adding up as many private sector partners as we can. But to give you a number, the whole goal of the initiative is 30 million US in private sector funding, and we are already over that amount. Nicole Hoffman says, if a nonprofit issues grants, will that disqualify them? Well, no, I mean, that can be taken as a leverage, as a contrapartida from the organization, and the money that you may receive from JEDI will be used to strengthen the services you give as a grant. I hope that answers your question.
Well, sorry, can I add another comment there?
Yes,
very quickly. No, when you spoke about the eligibility, only if you're a grant making foundation, like if your specific purpose is that, we wouldn't qualify that organization specifically. But if you provide entrepreneurial support or services, and you also do grant making in a portion of that, we can definitely consider it.
Thank you, Monica. Then Mauricio Miramontes says, hi, good morning. Is there any request preference to be focused on a specific value chain sector, agritourism, forestry? Thank you. The broad answer is no. The broad answer is no. However, you have to keep in mind the SDGs and the HACCP's priority. So, for example, we can talk about climate change, and you can talk about the impact of better services given to entrepreneurs in the agro sector, in the tourism sector, in the forestry sector. So you can link those to the SDGs, but there's no focus or will be preference to any specific value chain or sector. So you can apply if you're doing agritourism, forestry. Alan Pérez writes in Spanish, ¿existe algún tipo de restricción sobre cómo utilizar el fondo? Esa respuesta está en la parte en el documento de Q&A. Ahí están las restricciones de en qué se puede y en qué no se puede utilizar el dinero. Hay ejemplos, por ejemplo, de que se puede utilizar para dar capacitaciones, se puede utilizar para fortalecer los servicios que se le da al emprendedor y no se puede utilizar para darlo en préstamo y obtener una ganancia sobre eso. El fondo se puede utilizar para desarrollar innovaciones financieras o nuevos instrumentos para familias excluidas de los sistemas financieros tradicionales. O sea, la respuesta es sí, porque lo que están haciendo es creando un nuevo producto que va a beneficiar a emprendedores, en este caso pensando en familias excluidas. Entonces sería un sí, siempre y cuando los fondos se usen para fortalecer los servicios. Y la respuesta a la tercera pregunta de Alan, que si se puede utilizar parte del fondo como préstamos, es no. So doing a free translation, Alan's questions were related on the restrictions to use the funds. And he was asking if there's a restriction. And I mentioned that on the Q&A document, you can find some examples on how to use the funds, specifically to strengthen, for example, trainings or develop new products. And that answered the second question from Alan, that yes, as long as you prove that you use the money to strengthen and make better the services for entrepreneurs, then that's okay. And his third question was if you can use part of the fund as loans for family, and that's a no for the reasons I mentioned before. Eduardo Benitez says, good morning. If we are based in Honduras, can we still apply for this funding? Thank you so much. As it's mentioned in the call for concept notes and in the Q&A, you can apply if you are not in Guatemala, but the program is Guatemala only. So as long as your proposal, the activities in your proposals are for Guatemala, then you can apply, whether if you are in the US, in Mexico, in Honduras, or anywhere else in the world. The main purpose is to strengthen the ecosystem in Guatemala. We are also asking if you have operations in El Salvador or in Honduras, because we are also interested in exploring further activities in the medium term, but for now it's not. It's only for Guatemala. Lillian asks, are there any restrictions on what you fund, such as staff, logistics, and etc.? You can see in the Q&A document some examples, as I mentioned, but as long as you prove that they strengthen the services you give to entrepreneurs, it's included. What you cannot do is use this money to give loans to end beneficiaries, to entrepreneurs.
Well, sorry, very quick interruption. Just to maybe mention some of the budget categories that would actually be included, because there's a lot of questions around that. So basically, like you can include, programmatic support such as, let's say, administration and program management costs, case studies, dissemination and marketing, research and design, technology development, travel, workshops, and more, including indirect costs and overhead.
Thank you, Monica.
Yeah.
An anonymous says, greetings, our organization does not have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate. Are we able to charge the minimum rate of up to 10% of our modified total direct costs? I don't have the answer for that. I will keep it here in my notes so I can give you a direct answer on that. So maybe you can send me an email. I will put it in the chat box later with your specific question, and I will try to answer as soon as I can. Angel Takam says, in Spanish, para las organizaciones con fines de lucro, una vez terminado el apoyo por el tiempo definido, ¿qué pasa con la propiedad intelectual desarrollada? ¿Le pertenece al donante o a la institución desarrolladora? Todo lo que se genere con fondos de Usaid tiene propiedad de Usaid, ¿verdad? Entonces, si la propiedad intelectual queda como parte de Usaid, y lo que hay que ver es que, por ejemplo, si se reciben fondos de un donante privado, eso también podría cambiar la situación. Ya la propiedad intelectual puede que no sea parte de Usaid, sino que también el donante reclame la propiedad intelectual de esto. So doing a free translation of Angel Takam's question is, well, for for-profit organizations, after the initiative ends, what happens with the intellectual property? And I was mentioning that if it was funded with USAID funds, then the donor keeps the intellectual property. But there's the other case that if the private sector partner is the one funding the proposal, then that will have a different approach because they will decide whether the intellectual property is theirs or not. Next questions from John Strife. For the projects that will be supported by USAID funds, not by private sector partners, is there an idea of the number of grants that will be made available, or maybe the total amount? And the answer is no. As I mentioned, there will be a joint committee. So we don't have, how to say, the proportion of number of grants that will be funded by USAID or from private sector partners. So as I mentioned, I don't have the answer for that still, and I don't think there will be an answer as long as AJERAI keeps getting commitments from private sector partners. Diego Acuña says, in the call for concept papers, it is required for external US organizations to submit the W-8 form. However, this is a form for individuals or not institutions. The form for institution is the W-8-E. Yes, I agree with you, and the one you should use is the W-8-E, which is for institutions, because you will apply as an institution and not as an individual. We will change that in the call for concept notes in the short term. Okay, Martin Friedel says, thank you for the presentation. So I understand the total amount of initiatives will depend also on private sector funding, but can you give us a ballpark idea of how large the USAID Park Fund is? Yes, this is public. So as you know, the program, well, not the program, the initiative has a 7.5 million US from USAID. So you can estimate that we don't have a fixed number of awards we will give, but those 7.5 million US are is the total amount that ANDE is managing directly for the operation of the initiative, and to give some of the granting of the total amount.
Well, sorry.
Oh, sorry. You've got a lot of people in here now with you. Hi, everyone. This is Susanna Eastham, the Director of Membership and Programs for ANDE. And I just wanted to jump in to say, we have set aside a minimum of $2 million as the fund amount that Andy will be giving out via the Usaid funds. We do anticipate that that will be increased, hopefully significantly, by the private sector partners, but we don't have specific amounts from them yet. It's going to be based on the applications that come in and how well they fit their needs. So hopefully that is a helpful answer.
Thank you, Susana. Yes. Next one from Silvia Garcia. Can existing programs be funded? And the answer is yes, you can expand the programs you are currently working on. However, you will need to adapt them, for saying it so, in order for them to fully commit with JEDI's objective. So, for example, if you already have an accelerator program for entrepreneurs, then you can strengthen that service you give. So the answer is yes, as long as you align them to JEDI's objective, it's okay. Marcelo Gonzalez says, sorry to join late, an international NGO based in Guatemala can be able to apply for the grant. Yes, you can apply for the grant. That's a simple one. Yes, you can apply. Brian McDonald says, it is a bit unclear, sorry. It is a bit unclear what is meant by founders and how direct support to them is not allowed, but yet working capital is technically permitted as outlined on page 4 of the frequently asked questions. So could you please clarify what is meant here and different types of allowable support to LGBs? It is understood that loans, debt, equity are not allowable. So as Monica mentioned, you can find examples in the Q&A document. Yes, working capital is technically permitted. So the support you give to LGBs will be specifically, for example, on trainings, on strengthening the accelerator programs, or to fund an incubator program. However, the money you will give to the entrepreneurs cannot come from the funding from USAID. And it will depend if a private sector partner is interested on giving or accepting that their money to be used as loans or debts, but not with USAID funds. So you can, as Monica mentioned, you can put logistics costs, even overhead, as long as you are improving your capacity to give support to entrepreneurs. So I hope I answered that, Brian. Any specific question you have, send me an email and we'll treat it on case by case. Jessica Gonzalez says, are you interested in any economic sector, agriculture, tourism, food systems, tech, health? As I answered before, there is no specific sector. Of course, and I'll give you a hint here. So you need to look at what the priority of USAID is in Guatemala. So if we're talking about targeting communities that have a high rate of immigration, so you will need to focus on what those people are doing right now. So if you find a clear link that the community has a very strong agriculture sector that needs to be strengthened, then that can be a big that will call our attention. But if you find that tourism can also help on mitigation, irregular migration, then that's a plus too. So we don't have any specific sector, but we are looking for that alignment that the sector you are targeting to is related on the main goal of the whole initiative. So Alejandro Gonzalez says, hi, sorry, but from your answer, it is not 100% clear to me. You said that as long as the funds support entrepreneurs, but what if I am an entrepreneur with a rural electrification company that supports GetI objective? So this funding is not for entrepreneurs. This funding is for organizations that support entrepreneurs, right? So this funding will not be given to any company, business that is an entrepreneur, rather to the organizations that are giving support to entrepreneurs. So I hope that that's clear. If not, please send me an email and I will try to clarify it directly. Colum Muxio says, greetings from the Wildlife Rescue and Conservation Association, ARCAS. We are a Guatemalan NGO and have some experience in incubation, but are not specifically an ESO. Do you recommend strengthening our capacity in this regard or teaming with another ECO? That's up to you. If you want to strengthen your incubator program, then that's okay. But if you find that another SEO, which has more experience than you, then that's okay. I have no specific answer for that. I don't have a suggestion. As long as your proposal is aligned with GetI objectives, it will call our attention. Edwin Sanchez says, can we submit one concept note before the deadline? And in case we are approved in a year or so, submit another? And Monica is answering that, and it's a yes on the submission of the concept notes.
Well, sorry, just to complement for everyone, but part of GetI, and we obviously didn't explain all of the other components of the initiative, but we have planned to open another regranting facility for around 2022-2023, which will have different characteristics. But in that sense, kind of the second part of this question is you could apply to that second opportunity, but GetI's funding, like as of the call for concept notes now, will be decided in January, and will only consider the applications that we received before December 15, which is, yeah, before the deadline.
Thank you, Monica. So we have 10 more minutes. Stephanie de González says in Spanish, la base de definición de PEC será la definida por ANDE. ¿Hay un mínimo de tiempo que deban tener las empresas de operaciones o con un año es suficiente? Sí, la definición de pequeñas empresas en crecimiento es la que define ANDE. Y la verdad es que, vamos a ver, no puedo decirle si un mes es suficiente, 6 meses es suficiente, un año es suficiente, siempre y cuando se pueda demostrar la sostenibilidad y o la escalabilidad de las empresas a las que se les está apoyando, ¿verdad? Creo que con eso responde a la pregunta. No hay un mínimo de tiempo o un máximo de tiempo de operaciones de las empresas a las que se va a apoyar, siempre y cuando se pueda garantizar que hay sostenibilidad y escalabilidad de esas. Doing a free translation of Stephanie's question is the definition of SGBs. It's going to be the one defined by ANDE, and that's a yes. Is there a minimum of time that the businesses that we are going to support should have? And the answer, well, a vague answer for saying it so is that technically no. I mean, there's no minimum like 1 month, 6 months, a year, 10 years. However, we will see if you're targeting sustainable and scalable businesses. That summarizes my answer. Silvia Garcia asks, is there any specific ratio of leverage from the applicant organization? You can find that in the Q&A document, and no, there is no specific ratio. Joanna Renkens asks, is there possibility for a percentage of overhead in the budget? Again, you can find that in the Q&A document. It's a yes. You can, overheads are allowed. Lilian Ebner-Stoll asks, what are your expectations towards reporting, and how much of the budget should be spent on impact monitoring and evaluation? That's a great question, Lilian. Right now we are in the phase of receiving concept notes, right? Those that call our attentions will be asked to submit a full proposal. In that interim, while you are preparing your full proposal, you will receive help from Andy's team, specifically the M&E team, that will help you make an MEL plan for your proposal. So at the end, we will accompany you. We will be creating this MEL plan with you. And we don't have a specific amount you can or cannot use for MEL, but it will be an important part for us. And we will be giving support since the announcement of requesting full proposals till the end of the implementation of those. Okay, an anonymous asks, will funding for portfolio investments, will funding for portfolio investments for a microfinance institution as one part of the project be something that could be covered with this opportunity? No, as I mentioned, you cannot use the Usaid funding for investing, to giving money to the entrepreneurs or businesses. That will be a leverage from your side. Okay, Brian McDonald asks, is cost share or co-investment by applicants a positive factor in assessing submissions? Are you encouraging additional leverage funds by applicants? You know, leverage funding is a sign of the sustainability of any initiative. So we are not putting it very clear, and it's not required, but this will give a sign that this may continue, this may be sustainable, even after the initiative ends. So it's a big answer again, but we're not encouraging it. It's not required, but it will give us a sense of sustainability. Mario Chavez asks, the grant needs to be refunded if the organization doesn't reach the 100% of the goals established in the concept notes. I don't have the answer for that. We of course expect that what you write in the concept notes will be reached. We encourage to put realistic goals on that. So if you feel the number is too high for you in the initial idea you have for this implementation program, well, I suggest you put a realistic number there.
Well, complementing that, and Susana, if you want to jump in, but two comments. One, it's the payments are cost reimbursable. So we'll work with you and have, if I'm not mistaken, Susana, but quarterly payments. And the other thing to mention is the Andy staff will work very closely with the grantees, so we can support you like generally in your path of implementing. If there needs to be any specific changes, like due to contextual situations or anything, we can work with you in that. But the idea, as Hugo mentioned, is that you can establish realistic objectives. And yeah, we know, and the pandemic definitely showed us that things might change from one day to another. But Andy staff will be working with all of the grantees very closely, also to understand what are your challenges, and if something needs to change in the project, how can we help you to make that transition. But I don't know, Susana, if you want to complement with anything.
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Julio Flores asks in Spanish, ¿hay un límite en el presupuesto de los puestos de trabajo administrativo? No, Julio, no hay un límite. Free translation, is there a limit in the budget for staff, administrative staff? And the answer is no, there is no limit. Laura Chávez, also in Spanish, Junior Achievement tiene un proyecto basado en Guatemala, pero cuyo scope es Triángulo Norte. En razón a lo que mencionas, podemos aplicarlo para la región. Desafortunadamente, el programa, la iniciativa ahorita es solo para Guatemala, pero es muy llamativo de que estén en el Triángulo Norte para nosotros. Sin embargo, hoy por hoy, solo es para Guatemala. Pero en la nota conceptual pueden mencionarlo y es muy bueno para nosotros saber. So free translation, Junior Achievement has a project based in Guatemala, but its scope is Northern Triangle. So can you apply it for the region? The answer is unfortunately no. The funds are only for Guatemala, but it's very interesting for us to know this. Jessica Rockman asks, will Andy or Usaid favor multi-region programs? As I mentioned before, it is not a requirement, and it's not evaluated, or it has a ponderation. It's only interesting for us to know this for future programs. Anonymous asks, who are the members of the private sector? If we receive support from the private sector, what will be the role of the sponsor in the project? So right now, I cannot give you the names of the organizations of the private sector. And if we receive support from the private sector, what will be the role of the sponsor? Well, the main role will be funding, but also they will give monitoring and evaluation depending on their requirements, but they also will be interested on complying with JEDI objectives. So they will have a major role in this, because they are giving money, they're doing their own MEL, but they will support the MEL from JEDI. Okay, we are over time. Monica, I don't know if if we can stop now and answer the remaining questions in private, or if we continue.
Sure, I think maybe to make a very small closure, but if people can stay, we can definitely stay for a couple of more minutes and keep answering some of these questions. But if anyone needs to leave now, thanks a lot for being here with us today. We'll follow up via email to share with you the specific resources. But again, everything is linked to the fund's webpage. So please visit that. If you have any other specific questions, make sure to contact Hugo in the next couple of days. And again, thanks for the interest. We hope to see a lot of very interesting proposals in the next couple of weeks. And we'll, yeah, if you agree, Hugo, we'll keep answering some of the questions for a few minutes.
Sure. Yes. So thanks everyone for being here, and I'll go on answering the questions. So Diana Sanchez asks in Spanish, ¿podemos presentar la propuesta en Consorcio México-Guatemala con la institución mexicana a la cabeza del consorcio? Es sí, Diana. Siempre y cuando las operaciones sean en Guatemala, sí es posible. So free translation, if a Mexican organization could lead a consortium between a Mexican and a Guatemalan organization. And my answer was, as long as the operations are in Guatemala, and it's a yes. Okay, Carla Toledo asks in Spanish, si contamos con un programa de emprendimiento y queremos elevarlo a incubadoras y startup para que se conviertan en parte de cadena de valor de grandes empresas, ¿esto es válido? Siempre y cuando, Carla, se tenga en mente que el beneficiario final es el grupo objetivo que mencioné. Mujeres, jóvenes, área rural, es válido, ¿verdad? Si hay fondos del sector privado que se unan como contrapartida, también es muy valioso para nosotros. So, free translation, Carla asked if we have an entrepreneurship program and we want to elevate it up to an incubator program that could help entrepreneurship that match with the interest of a private sector or big companies. The answer is yes, as long as you have you keep in mind the objective of the program, which is to attend and serve better to women, youth from rural areas. So as long as this scaling up to incubator or accelerator helps that population, it's interesting for us. Julio Flores asks, ¿existe una meta mínima máxima de emprendedores atendidos? No hay mínimos ni máximos, Julio. Free translation, is there a minimum or maximum number of entrepreneurs supported? And the answer is no, there's no minimum or maximum. Esther Santizo asks, what is the definition of youth? This is an interesting question. Susana, do you have an answer for that?
It's a great question. I don't have a great answer for that. I think there is some standard answer that it's like under 25-year-olds, I want to say, but I don't think we have a really specific qualification for that. We're looking at those that are employable youth. It's not like children, for instance. So typically that's looking at employing, it's youth underemployment that it's typically trying to address when we talk about youth.
Thank you, Susana. Yes, as long as you are not taking them from formal education to work, then it's also good for us. And or maybe do you have a glossary about the proposal? Not yet. We will define if we do a glossary. Thank you. And I guess that's it. I have answered most of almost all of the questions. I have an anonymous question I didn't answer. Please send me an email, and that should be it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Sorry, rescuing one from the chat box. David asked a very good question. Like, is it possible to purchase like productive infrastructure with the funds of Usaid and Andy? I don't know if David, if you're still there, if you want to clarify what specifically what you mean with productive infrastructure, I can imagine, but I don't want to assume anything. So if you're still there, I appreciate the clarification.
Monica, typically that's referring to something that would be qualify as working capital, which is allowed. As you'll see in our FAQs, it is allowed, but any expenses need to be justified. I would say, for instance, if the vast majority of your budget is that, it's probably not the best use of your budget and probably won't be looked upon as favorably as something else. But if it's part of your budget, you know, it is definitely allowed. So that's fine.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so. Okay, I have one last one from Ralph Meriam. Will local organizations or local organization-led consortiums be favored over INGOs or IO-led proposals? No. The simple answer is no. We're interested in the proposal. Like,
yeah. I will say though that Hugo, the one thing I would like to add there is that Andy does want to really support locally based organizations. And so we do keep an eye on that, and we do have a diversity screen within our assessment that we do. And so we want to make sure that there is a really good balance and mix of all of those who should be represented and where this funding should go, with an eye to making sure there are locally led and locally owned organizations represented in the winners.
Great.
Okay, so that's it from our side. Thanks everyone for being here. As I mentioned, this recording will be posted shortly in the webpage of the fund. Also, we will be updating on Friday the document from the Q&A, adding some of the ones we received today. And that's it from our side. Thank you very much, and have a great one. I don't know, Monica, Susana, if you want to say bye.
Thank you, everyone. We're really excited to read your proposals.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.